Leave it to Playboy to have an interview with a dick. The member in question, of course, being former Vice President Dick Cheney. Now, Dick Cheney was talking to Playboy, and they had a pretty extensive interview. It went around to a lot of different subjects. For example, Ferguson, they talked about Iraq, they talked about Putin, and they talked, of course, about President Obama. Now, what Dick Cheney had to say about President Obama is unsurprising. In this, he basically points out that he thinks that Obama is the worst president that he's ever had or seen in his entire lifetime. The absolute worst president. And he says, my view of this is the criticism is merited because of his poor performance. Or lack of performance, because he's incompetent. He can't do anything right. Obama can't do anything right. Now, was he actually paying attention during the years that he was serving under George W. Bush? Were you paying attention, Dick? When, you guys launched two very unsuccessful wars, very costly wars in the Middle East that we're still paying for? Or how about your tax cuts, the Bush tax cuts, that of course caused a huge deficit and have added massive amounts of money to our national debt, which now stands at $16 trillion. Were you awake at all during that time? Were you paying attention? Or were you too busy shooting your friends in the face in the forest while hunting? Were you paying attention, Dick? The worst president in history? In your lifetime? Come on, man. Really? Now, of course, he says, well, Obama is incompetent. And he also is kind of racist. Or at least he loves to play the race card. Now, that's a consistent criticism that comes from the right. And Dick Cheney is of no exception. He says in this interview with Playboy, quote, I think they're playing the race card. Certainly we haven't given up, nor should we, give up the right to criticize an administration and public officials. Now, hold on there. Hold on there. Of course we should be able to criticize the administration. I agree with that. However, the Dick Cheney during the presidency of George W. Bush didn't agree with that. Remember what happened when you criticized the presidency, the office of the administration during the George W. Bush era? You were unpatriotic. Just ask the Dixie Chicks. Good example. You come up against the Iraq War, which obviously turned out to be a complete unmitigated disaster. You come out against that war, you are somehow unpatriotic. You are un-American. You are un-American. If you come out against that war, if you come out against my administration. But when it's the Bush or when it's the Obama administration, yeah, of course you should be able to come out against your administration. But he charges that his criticisms are considered or labeled as racism. No, it's got nothing to do with the fact that he's black. He's just incompetent and lazy. What? What? I'm just saying he's incompetent and lazy. That damn lazy black guy. I mean, lazy Obama. I mean, Kenyan Muslim. So there you go. And now, it's not just on President Obama on how he's governed, or tried to govern. It's, of course, he goes into Ferguson. Now, he thought the protests in Ferguson and Black Lives Matter were wrongly linked to race, despite the fact that the DOJ report shows how police and city officials and courts were all set up to basically extort the African American community out of as much money using fines and fees as possible, using them as a cash cow to pay for the city. But no, he says, look, it seems I'm disappointed, I guess, in the Obama administration's response to what happened in Ferguson. I'm just disappointed they had to go and play the race card. Really? We should not sort of throw it all over the burden of race or racial inequality or racial discrimination as being responsible for this particular event. Yeah, it kind of is, because when you in a position of power target a minority in your jurisdiction and unfairly target them with fines and fees and things of that nature, you are definitely making it racial. Now, you could throw in socioeconomic status as part of that. I understand. Socioeconomic status and race can be linked, especially when it comes to basically crushing the poor. There are more poor black people than there are poor white people. Now, white people get thrown in there and they get crushed just as easy. Remember, 67% of Ferguson was black. And yet over 88% of African Americans were targeted with, they had 80 to 90% more, violence against African Americans. They got cited more often for fines and fees and tickets. They were targeted more. But here's Dick Cheney saying, it's not about race. It's not about race. I guess if we were a poor white guy, we'd crush them just as hard. Touché. Touché. Now, of course, he also says that Obama has undone some of the legacies, the proud legacies of President George Bush. His precipitous withdrawal and refusal to leave any stay-behind forces to negotiate a status of forces agreement with the Iraqis was a huge mistake. We are paying the price for it now. He's having to go back in now, and the guy who campaigned on the basis of bring the boys home and get out of Iraq is now redeploying forces to Iraq. Yeah, well, there's that whole problem of us invading Iraq in the first place and turning it into a fucking quagmire. You undid the stability in the region. You and George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld and all the other war criminals that you served with destroyed the balance of power in the region and created ISIS. Yeah. You built that. You helped build that, Dick. You helped build that. And now he says, well, it's Obama's fault. He didn't do a status of forces agreement. So he pulled out. We shouldn't have been in there in the first place, so we wouldn't have had to pull out. And it was your ass that put us there. So if anybody's fault that this happened, the ISIS was created, it's yours, Dick. It's yours. This Dick has a gigantic set of balls on him to go out and say this kind of bullshit to Playboy. To say this kind of bullshit at all. To even come out in public. He's got some balls. And to go out and say, Obama is the absolute worst president I have seen in my lifetime. Even compared to Jimmy Carter. You know how they like to beat up on Jimmy Carter. Now they're beating up on Obama even worse. It's ridiculous. Quote, I look at Barack Obama and I see the worst president of my lifetime, without question, and that's saying something. I used to have significant criticism of Jimmy Carter, but compared to Barack Obama and the damage he is doing to the nation, it's a tragedy. A real tragedy. And we are going to pay a hell of a price just to try and dig out from under his presidency. Actually, we've been trying to dig out of George W. Bush's presidency for a very long time. And we're still continuing to dig out of that legacy that you helped leave.